Welcome to the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top founders and experts in the e-commerce industry and take an in-depth look at the struggles and successes in growing e-commerce brands profitably.
Hey guys, Josh Chin here. I'm the host of the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top experts and entrepreneurs in the e-commerce industry and go behind the scenes and the struggles of the struggles and successes in growing a brand. I can't believe I butchered that. I do that all the time. This episode is brought to you by Chronos.agency. And if you run a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand is ready to scale and to double your customer lifetime value through retention marketing, Chronos is your company. We've helped hundreds of brands scale profits with email, SMS, and mobile push while getting an average of 3,500% ROI from our efforts. We've worked with brands like Truly Beauty, The Udi, Elias Skin, and many more. The next step is to email us at sales@chronos.agency, or you can go to chronos.agency to learn more. Today's guest is a pioneer in the direct response advertising, TV advertising industry since a long time ago, Rick Cesari. Rick, welcome to the show. And Rick, you have been someone that I have kind of studied your work for quite a bit of time without knowing that it was part of your work. Rick has been monumental in the development of iconic brands such as Juiceman, Sonicare, the George Foreman Grill, OxiClean, GoPro, from a startup to making multi-billion dollars in sales, over $1 billion in sales in just a few short years through TV advertising. Rick is a wizard in TV advertising, in direct response marketing, and he is an author of a number of books, which we'll get into in a little bit. And Rick continues on to be on the cutting edge of direct response as platforms evolved, and he has also evolved over the years. And I'm excited to have you on the show and kind of pick your mind, Rick, on the things that have evolved over the years and what you think about its development.
That's great. And Josh, thank you for the great introduction. I'm really looking forward to the podcast. I just want to share a quick story with your listeners. We actually connected about a month ago, and we were supposed to do this podcast, and you and I just started talking about the different war stories and clients and case studies. And before we knew it, an hour was up. So we had to reschedule this podcast. So I'm glad we're finally able to do it, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of great information.
Yes, it was so much fun. And it's, you know what, one of the things that I've come to realize is that the platforms have changed significantly over the years, but the essence of what makes advertising successful, what makes marketing successful, hasn't changed all that much, because people don't change all that much over the course of 10, 20, 30 years. Do you agree with that statement?
I agree 100%. I thought you were quoting something from one of my books, because I tell people that all the time, that you really need to understand basic human psychology, basic direct marketing principles, and then the technology is always going to change. It has throughout history, and just to be able to adapt the knowledge, direct response marketing, direct to consumer marketing knowledge to the current platforms where the viewers are. I also have another thing which really I think is important in direct to consumer marketing. And I'm a big believer in really being agnostic when it comes to platforms. And I really am a big believer in letting the consumer choose where they want to buy a product. Now, because all different people have all different types of shopping habits, but that doesn't mean that you can't ramp up a certain platform faster. I just always like to offer the consumer the choice of where they want to buy a product or service or course or whatever you're selling.
Rick, you took brands like the George Foreman Grill, Sonicare toothbrush to TV. What was it like to apply some of the ideas and strategies that you've tested over the years to a startup like GoPro, and taking them from a I suppose a relatively new age type of product to TV from an offline and online channel. What was that like?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like you said earlier, even though the platforms have changed, the basic marketing hasn't. And so I'll just give you a quick, when we um, start a project like Sonicare, and this is going back the early to mid 90s to give people a time frame. And they were having the problem with Sonicare was it was a $150 toothbrush. And people didn't understand sonic technology, and they'd go into a store and they'd be like, well, why would I buy a toothbrush for $150? So I've always been a big believer in what I call selling through education. So educating the consumer about the benefits of a product, the uniqueness of product, and what benefits it could deliver to the end user. And once people really understand those things, you're not selling anymore. People are making a decision to buy, and you don't really have to, quote unquote, sell to people. And so when you talk about, to answer your question, how something changed from like the early 90s with Sonicare to something with GoPro, which we started working with them about, I think, 2015 or so. I think that for me, anyway, with all of the different advent of different platforms and ways to reach the end user, in my opinion, people will say it got complicated, but I think marketing's actually gotten easier because you have more ways to reach the end user or the audience. And so I think GoPro was a really great example of the first brand I worked with that really straddled kind of the old direct response TV with the online and content marketing and YouTube advertising that they were doing. And, the one thing, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more as we go along, is when you are able to incorporate a really successful direct response TV advertising program, still today with all of the people that are purchasing online, it really acts as like a magnifying glass on all of your other marketing channels. So if you're able to implement this successful direct response TV program, all your other channels will rise anywhere from 20 to 50% just in the business from running the TV ads. And probably the biggest difference between, if you go back like 25 years ago with Sonicare and GoPro, or even current brands, which we can talk about that I'm working with now, is we used to launch brands on TV. It was very expensive. It's not cheap to make a half-hour TV or a 60-second TV spot, and it's not cheap to buy the TV time. And as opposed to now, if we're going to launch a new brand, we always do it online, and until we figure out what the consumer is responding to, it's much easier to reach people, much easier to target people, and much easier to find out what's motivating them. And then if we can do a successful online launch, then it makes sense at some point down the road to layer in TV at that point.
Interesting. So the steps, the sequencing of which channel go with first has changed.
Yeah, flip-flop pretty much.
What are some of the things? Let's talk about differences. What are some of the things that you see TV being able to do that channels like paid social and paid search are just not able to?
I think you're able to reach. I've always talked about direct response TV of being more of a shotgun blast. So there's a group of people that it's, even though it's becoming less and less, there's a certain group of people that you're only going to be able to reach through TV. And so you're when you're running that TV campaign, I think you're basically hitting all the potential demographics of potential purchasers of the product. So then as you're running this TV and you're getting leads, building your database, You can then remarket to them, target specific, use different online platforms to market specifically to the different segments of people. But TV is really good at creating large scale awareness. And that's really how we've used it in the last 5 years. And two current projects, which you and I talked about a little earlier. One is a mattress company called Dormeo, and they started out with online marketing and Facebook ads, and then we made a TV show. And in 18 months, they were able to grow from 0 to about 40 million in sales, which is pretty good. I mean, there's other companies that have grown faster, but that's what
I'll take that any day.
Yeah, exactly. Those are good results. And it's actually more now because it's been more than 18 months. And so that's what TV is good at is if you do it correctly and your product has the right margins, you can rapidly scale a business. And, all those different brands you mentioned earlier are perfect examples of pretty much startup companies, new products introduced into the market, but all of them probably went from 0 to 10 million and 20 and more very rapidly because of the success of the direct response TV.
Interesting. And you talked a little bit about the magnifying effect, the amplifier on other channels that we utilize. I think that's a really interesting point to think about when we think of launching brands and finding that fit, that product market fit through social channels, through online channels, and then amplifying that result with TV, which is as you call it, a shotgun blast, which I 100% agree with. Are there any times in your career where that has backfired? It hasn't worked out? Any favorite failures that you could talk about?
Yeah, anybody that's a marketer, if they haven't had failures, they're probably not being honest with you. And you know that, even though you're kind of seem to be on a little bit on the younger side, but you just there's always going to be failures, but the key is to be able to learn from them. So my first really hard lesson was, this goes back a long time ago. We had launched the Juiceman. It was fantastically successful. Went from 0 to 75 million in a little over 3 years. It was a company that was built on health, and we were teaching people to eat healthy, and juicing was one way to get more fruits and vegetables in your diet. So we said, okay, how can we get people to get more healthy grains into their diet? And bread machines were starting to become very popular at the time. And so we said, okay, we'll make the Breadman bread machine. We'll use the same marketing principles. We got a spokesperson. He had a book. Everything was the same. And it was a good category. Bread machines were selling like crazy. However, no matter how hard I tried, I could never get it to work on TV. And I did learn a very hard lesson, which I applied, learned from and applied in future campaigns, was that you have to really understand the cost structure of, if I always call it doing a financial analysis before you do any type of marketing initiative. And basically the problem with the bread machine, with the juice machine, we were taking a product that cost $30 and we were able to sell it for $300. With the bread machines, lots of margin in there. With the bread machines, we were paying about $125 for the cost of the product and trying to sell it for that same $300. So the cost structure there wasn't enough margin dollars to make it work. So prior to doing any type of product since that time, we look at, consumer response. We look at the unique selling proposition. We look at all the benefits of the product, but probably the single most important thing is to make sure it fits a financial model where you're able to do a paid advertising program, which is a good way of scaling a product. And you have to have enough margin in the product to do that. So that was probably one of the biggest, earliest lessons I learned, which still holds true today. I mean,
and you've hinted on that when you mentioned Dormeo, the mattress brand that you currently work on. Mm-hmm. Can we dive a little bit deeper into Dormeo? I'm interested.
Absolutely,
to unpack that.
Absolutely.
What makes Dormeo successful in TV advertising? You talked about having amazing margins and obviously amazing products, but what else? What's that formula if there's one?
Well, I think there is one because if you've ever or any of your listeners have ever like when shopping for a mattress or a mattress topper, there's like literally hundreds of them out there, and it's just a category where it's a good category if you can be successful. But the thing that made Dormeo unique is that it had a very strong, unique selling proposition, a differentiator, and it was what they call the OctaSpring technology, which is basically taking like a metal bed spring, which was the old technology, combining it with memory foam, and they made the bed springs pretty much out of memory foam, and they had a patent on it. So nobody else could offer that technology. So everything we talked about in the direct response TV and the Facebook ads centered around the fact that our product Dormeo had something called OctaSpring technology. We explained to people what that is, but then more important, we explained the benefit to the end user. One, with the OctaSpring, it would basically support your hips and shoulders at that people. These were different pain points people would have, but then also it was kept you cool because air could circulate through that OctaSpring technology. So we hit two major things that create sleep problems. One was that people get hot, so this had a built-in cooling technology, and then two, that it addressed pain that people were having in their shoulders and their hips. And one of the most successful Facebook ads, and this is where we took learnings from online success, one of the most successful Facebook ads for the product basically just was the headline was hips and shoulders. And people understood that if you said that you were offering support in areas where they won't normally getting it. And so we incorporated that into the TV advertising, and it was helped make it successful.
What are the costs involved in producing a TV ad like the one at Dormeo?
Yeah, that would run anywhere from to do a 30-minute. So normally when a client comes to us to hire us to do a TV show, we ask them, are we doing a 30-second spot, a 60-second spot, a 120-second spot, or a 30-minute infomercial? What I like to do, being a marketer, is I like to have as many marketing tools as possible. So I like to, if the product warrants it, not all of them do, but in the case of Dormeo, it was a 30-minute infomercial and then a 60-second spot and a 120-second spot. And if you do all of the creatives at once, you can save some money. But normally a project like that is going to run between $200,000 and $250,000 to make all that. Now that sounds like a lot of money for some marketers and some product owners or business owners. But if you're at that stage where your company's growing, you've had success on some of the paid social channels, now all of a sudden you're not just making a 30-minute infomercial and a 60-second TV spot. You're also creating a huge library of video content that then you can take and use, through to create Facebook ads, to use on your Amazon listings. You just know how much everybody's spending on content these days. You can basically kill several birds with one stone by producing these ads, producing content that can then be multi-purposed into different types of video ads for your product.
That makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
In your career, you've built a ton of successful ads, a lot of successful direct response TV ads as well. What's your favorite that either you have built or you've seen in the recent years?
That's a great question. First, I'll answer the first part of that. My personal favorite of all the different ones that I did were two, kind of at the beginning of my career and more towards the more recently. The very first one, the Juiceman, I was very passionate about health. My father passed away when he was very young from a heart attack. So I was always into health through good nutrition. And so I was personally a person who drank a lot of fresh juices. And when I was able to take my personal love of doing that and eating this way and then turn it into a successful marketing program, that's where, you always read about you have to be passionate about what you sell. And you're not always, that doesn't always happen when you're a marketer, but in that case, it was a perfect blend of the two. Then I have to say that the GoPro, because it just the way it started, the founder of the company, Nick Woodman, he had heard about some of the successes I've had in the past, and he flew up to Seattle, and we went out, and I remember we had like a 3-hour lunch, and I remember what he ordered a beer and a plate of chili cheese fries, and we sat down, and he basically told me what he wanted to do with the company, and they were at this point. He had already launched the product, but it was basically just selling through some surf shops on the West Coast. And we talked about the strategy on how literally sat down at that at that lunch meeting and talked about how we wanted to build a company that was doing $1 billion in sales. And he was like so totally, believing that it was possible and that was he was going to accomplish. And then we were just basically mapping out different ways to do that. And I liked it because that was the first time where for a product I had worked on where TV took a back seat to the online marketing they were doing. But we were able to do one really, really important thing with the GoPro. When we ran our TV ads, we had an offer at the end. Normally a product like that would be like a brand commercial. They would you've seen all the cool footage and people jumping off of mountains in wingsuits and snowboarding and bicycling. But we told them that at the end of every commercial, we made an offer. They had a contest. They said, go to our website. People will win one of everything we make every single day. So, being in direct in emailing, wow. Basically people would go from the TV commercial. They would leave their name and email address because they had to do that to sign up for the contest. So then obviously you could remarket to them. But then the other thing that happened once they got to the website, so that was the first good thing. We built the database. The second thing that happened was that people would come to the website, they would see all the cool videos and they would share them with their friends. So it created kind of a viral effect that just was, inherent to GoPro footage because it was so cool. And then the last thing that happened was more strict, tried and true direct response. People would come to the website, they'd buy cameras, and that revenue offset the advertising costs, so which let us ramp it up. And when we started running the TV, we did all the TV advertising for GoPro. When we started ramping up, they were probably doing about 5 or 6 million in sales. And 8 years later, they hit $1 billion and they went public on the New York Stock Exchange. And that was a pretty intense ride. But it was because really it was the perfect blending of a successful TV campaign. And this is the part that I didn't contribute much, but they had the internal expertise. They were really good online marketers, and they were able to leverage all the awareness that TV was generating into orders, and that was I think the reason it was able to grow so fast. So those are the two of my own personal that I did that were my favorites.
Rick, there's so much to unpack there. And we could go like a couple of different paths here, but I'm curious. Were you there when they rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange?
I wasn't there, but I in my PowerPoint presentation I have a message. I had sent Nick a text message, and he sent me back a message. He was actually standing on the podium where they ring the bell, and he goes, WTF, thanks to your, I can't believe this is happening. Thanks to you and your team, everything we talked about is finally happening. And it was a really cool text message. So I show everybody that in my PowerPoint presentation.
That is super cool. That is super cool. That beats any testimony. We were talking about using Riverside for testimonials
Yes.
and video
Yeah.
shoots. That beats anything that we've ever been
No,
able to create.
I have, and so, that's probably the single best testimonial. But then, and you do the same thing when you have successful client campaigns.
Mhm.
The people that Joel Apple, who was one of the founders of OxiClean, really good testimonials from him, and the marketing guys at Sonicare, I have testimonials from them. And if you do a good job for people, they're really happy to give you a good testimonial.
Absolutely. And Rick, you talked about Nick having this crazy, insane vision
Yeah. Oh,
of
yeah.
making $1 billion in sales when they're just at 5-6 mil a year.
Well, actually, when we first met with him, he was doing about 1 million in sales.
So even smaller than that. Okay,
Yeah.
so a
Yeah.
million. Geez, okay. Now I cannot envision what it's like to be making $1 billion in sales um a year, let alone a
Mhm.
billion as a number. Like a million is a lot, but a
Yeah.
billion is 1,000 times of that. Did you believe him when he pitched you the idea?
Um, the only reason I did believe him is I had been involved prior to Nick this was probably about 15 years earlier with launching the George Foreman Grill. So I watched a product go from zero to $1 billion. Um, and so I knew it was possible. I, and I, if there's an inventor or product owner that has that much
Conviction?
conviction, that's a great word. I'm not going to throw any water on the fire. You know what I mean? I don't know that I didn't believe him, but I was not going to kind of dampen the excitement. And then it just started happening. It's like and the other way is, I think in my mind is, what's wrong with shooting for $1 billion? And if you only make it halfway, that's still pretty good, or a quarter of the way. And
Yeah.
so, not every product you're going to do does that well. But anyway, I didn't, put it this way, I didn't not believe him. You know what I mean?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Now,
Hmm.
Rick, as a um from I suppose I would consider your business an agency partner of GoPro. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, we at the time, my company, the legal name was Cesari Response Television, but at the time our DBA was Cesari Media, and we
Hmm.
were the TV agency for GoPro.
What was it like growing with a company that's that fast? Because I've experienced clients going from making 10, 20 million a year to 200 million a year in a matter of like 18 months. And that's kind of that's already quite a bit to
Oh yeah,
handle and
yeah.
puts a lot of stress on on the internal agency operations, but we managed to pull it off. But that was tough. I cannot imagine someone going from 1 to 1 billion in sales a year in a matter of eight years. What was that like?
Well, it was, you just explained it, that you're basically, it's like an old saying, it's like drinking from a fire hose.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to always keep up, and luckily, um, for the work that we were able to do, we were able to keep up just by adding more media buyers to the case, but we had a core team that basically was with Nick from day one, and just would, almost on a weekly basis. He was based down in San Francisco, just south of San Francisco, and they would fly down there almost on a weekly basis to meet. And this was before Zoom was very popular. I don't even know if
Yeah.
Zoom was around, so they were still doing a lot of face-to-face meetings and stuff like
Right.
that. But it was fun because you got to do, because of the high visibility and the type of product it was, you got to do a lot of fun things, like the TV stations that would carry the Olympics, because we were spending so much money, they gave us, free like tickets and flights to the Olympics. And obviously we'd pass that along to the client, who was really happy about that. And just all sorts of really fun things like that. And then when it came to Super Bowl ads, and this is interesting because, you probably see different companies like doing Super Bowl ads, and it becomes more of an ego show than it does a successful marketing campaign. But one things we did with GoPro that was really smart is that we, instead of buying and paying a huge amount of money for a 30-second spot, we then went to like the top 15 markets and just ran local inserts. And so for a fraction of the cost of a Super Bowl, a Super Bowl on a national level, we were able to cover the top 15 markets with Super Bowl ads. And so there was lots of fun things we were doing like that you can only happens with a really good client that's, growing really quickly.
And a really good agency.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you describe, if a really good friend would describe Rick, how would he describe you? Or she?
Yeah, that's people say I'm kind of quiet. I like in a meeting, instead of talking, I'm the one that's kind of listening to everybody, and just observant, I guess, is a good description. And I think that's a good way of what led to many of these successful products, because I tell everybody, one of my favorite things to do when I'm first doing a project is I like to contact like 10 or 20 people, usually 20 or 25 people. We reach out to the database of the company that we're working with, and then talk to these people. In my case, I had happened to have a video camera running. And after doing about 20 of these interviews, we might find 2 or 3 that can be testimonials. But I'll tell you what, you hear enough good input to know exactly why someone bought a product, what got them excited about it, what they don't like about it. And I've always found it easy to really create the advertising or the marketing if I'm able to talk to 20 or 25 real customers and be able to ask them, interview them, like we're doing right now, like you're asking me questions. And I get enough information to be able to craft some ads out of that, because you start to see trends. If you talk to 20 people, you start to see, it doesn't have to be 20 exactly, but you start to see trends again, like I said, of what made them buy, what they liked. And then you just basically make sure that you're including that information in the advertisements.
Love that. Rick, what's one message that you wish more people would know about? Or in the spirit of the internet, if you could send a push notification onto every mobile phone that exists today in the world, what would that push notification say or contain?
That's a great question that makes you really think. But in this environment right now, obviously with the war, invasion of Ukraine going on, and we're coming out of 2 years of COVID, and it's really just to kind of chill out and relax. And I don't mean that in a slacker type of way. I just mean that kind of take a step back and just observe what's happening before taking any kind of action or reaching out. You had asked me some traits if someone were to describe me, and I still think that is true, that I just like to observe something before taking any type of action. And I think a lot of people these days react. I mean, if you read any kind of Facebook groups or things like that, people just react so strongly to things. And just think for yourself and observe before jumping to conclusions, I think would be a good message.
Rick, that's a wonderful way to end the episode. Thank you so much for gracing your time. I've had a lot of fun. I still have a bunch of questions I would love to ask. But
if you want to do a follow up
exactly, yeah.
session, let's plan on doing that, because I even have a lot. I haven't even shared with people how much I enjoyed speaking with you, because I love what you do, the email marketing, and that it's such important component to building any business. And you and I haven't worked on a project together yet, but I'm sure that's going to happen relatively soon.
Yeah, 100%. That's absolutely. And I think building an email list, building an audience that you own, that you have direct access to, is paramount to any brand's success today and beyond.
I agree with you. And we didn't even talk about that. Every one of those products you mentioned, they all had email lists. We all marketed to them. There you go. We talk about the Juiceman. I had 500,000 names on a Juiceman list when we sent out a postcard just offering people a new cutting blade, and it generated $500,000 in sales. And that was the old snail mail type of thing. But I agree with you 100% that should be the kind of the foundation of where a company growth comes from. And you should do it while you're small and understand how to do it. So as you get bigger and names start coming in, and you really know how to take advantage of those and build lifetime value, like you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast.
I love that you say that, Rick, because people often ask me, when do you think I should start? I'm building a new brand. When do you think I should start investing and putting time into email marketing and building out my own marketing channels like email and SMS? And my response is always as soon as you start launching your first ad, because that's gonna immediately, basically it's gonna pay off. It's gonna
even before your first ad. However, customers are finding you and buying your product, as soon as they start buying your product, they should be on your database. You know that, but yes, immediately start it, because
couldn't agree more.
And yeah, exactly.
Couldn't agree more. And it's such a strong learning. It creates such a strong learning loop, because you get to see what people respond to so cheaply. Email is free, effectively, when you're sending out an email. I would love to dive deeper into that. I
think we should, and I think I should interview you a little bit on the next session and talk about email, because talk about specifically. I want to hear more about the email techniques that you implement and when you implement them, and how that differs for each product. And then I can compare it to what we did with some of our products, because we talked about TV advertising. TV advertising was the thing that generated awareness and generated names, but then there was the follow-up through direct mail or email or that type of thing. And that was a huge part of every one of those businesses.
Love that. 100%. I would love to geek out with you, and we should probably schedule a separate session for that. In the meantime, for people listening who are interested to connect with you, learn more about what you do, where should they go to?
They should just go to my personal website, which is rick@rickcesari.com. And they can connect with me there, or just send me an email. I love getting emails from people. I do a lot of podcasts like this, and I always give out my personal email address, which is rick@rickcesari.com. And if you want to send me an email and ask a question about anything we talked about, or any problem that marketing problem that you might be having with your business, feel free to reach out at rick@rickcesari. And my last name is spelled Cesari.
Thank you. And as per usual, all links will be in the show notes. You guys can go to chronos.agency/podcast for the latest show notes. Rick, thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. Thank you. And great speaking with you.
Thanks for listening to the E-Commerce Profits Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes.